There's nothing I can do right now. Yeah. Is there something that's heavy itching?
Do we have keys still?
Yeah.
Say 10. Say 10. That's the first patient. Say 10. That's 10 plus.
$250. I just started it a minute ago. It's up there. Patrick. I'm ready. It's live.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Rich Aka. I'm the CEO for Immunity Bio, and it's my privilege to introduce to you today Dr. Patrick Soon-Shiong. He's the founder of Immunity Bio, the Executive Chairman, and the Global Chief Scientific and Medical Officer. In the next 45 minutes, they'll walk you through some information. I would encourage you, if you have questions, to please ask along the way, and we will go ahead and get started. Patrick?
Thank you, Rich. I'm really excited today. This has been a very interesting AUA session for us because we're trying to figure out how do we start revealing what I believe is a paradigm change for bladder cancer, prostate cancer, renal cancer. And I've been going through the meeting, having one-on-one sessions with some of the key opinion leaders. And what's exciting is when the revelation actually gets exposed, the word R comes out. And so I'm going to take this opportunity to really reveal what I consider a paradigm change. And with really, I was just handed this, and I'm going to read this Pharma headline that just came out maybe this morning. And as J&J aims to fundamentally change how bladder cancer type is treated, Immunity Bio defense. And we will talk about it because we're certainly not playing defense, and certainly there's no fundamental change. In fact, the fundamental change is what we'll be presenting to you. And rather than old chemotherapy that really is very toxic to the bladder and the human system, we will show you the fundamental change. And we're certainly not playing defense. I think the opportunity for us really to actually have a paradigm change is what I want to share with you today. This one slide is up here with regard to the recombinant BCG, just so we can start there, and I'll get into my talk itself. But I think I want to urge all of you, as you can see, we are a biotech company that's facing the challenges of our competitors, which are many big pharma. And Merck, as you know, has had a shortage of BCG, and BCG is critical. What's important about this BCG is recombinant BCG. There's literally an unlimited supply. We can provide 1 million vials of this BCG within a period that we can address this shortage. So this QR code has allowed anybody to sign up because the FDA has given us expanded access approval, and now I think we're up to 200 sites that are now getting access to this BCG, so we'll get rid of the shortage. But let me address then, hopefully this works. Does it work? Can I get the next slide, please? I'm pressing the numbers. Is somebody controlling the slide? Try it again. We've gone too far. Okay, when we get back, sorry about that. Okay, so let's talk about the talk that I'm about to give today, and I'll give you a few, in order for me to break this into some digestible bites, we're going to have maybe several sections. The first section is just talk about the supercharged recombinant BCG, which stimulates CD8 T cells. But really, this whole talk about is the paradigm change, is truly the superpower of the thing called lymphocytes in prolonging survival in patients with cancer. I'll talk about lymphocytes as the unrecognized organ at risk. It's amazing, for 75 years, we as a industry of doctors have put lymphocytes at risk. Lymphocytes happens to be the only very cells that kill cancer, your NK T cells, but we put it at risk. There's really been a missing link. We didn't understand the word lymphopenia. So I've gone around speaking to my friends, and I would urge you to speak to your colleagues and ask them, when you do a CBC, you measure for anemia, you measure ANC for lymph neutropenia. But do you know what ALC is? And the question is, curiously, what is ALC? ALC is the absolute lymphocyte count in your CBC, which measures the level of T cells and NK cells. And when it drops below 1,000, you have lymphopenia. And you'll see the consequences of that. If you have no cells that can protect you from cancer, there's nothing else that really matters. On the basis of understanding that, Tiva is now the world's, the nation's the history's first product ever to address this lymphopenia. And when you do that, we have this unprecedented change in data, which will show you in bladder, but will also show you this in other tumor types. And then we'll talk about where we are with papillary disease. So with regard to this BCG, what's exciting about this BCG is it's been engineered so that it goes into the intracellular compartment of the tumor. I'm not sure why this thing is moving. So that you have CD8 T cells. And with the opportunity to grow CD8 T cells, you have a progression-free survival primary endpoint, which has been met now in Europe of 4 years at 42%, no recurrence. So we have, sorry, these slides are moving without mine. Is this on auto roll? Apologize for that. Some technical difficulties here. I'll just talk anyway. So what's happened is that this supercharged BCG now is a powerful lymphocyte stimulator. So for the first time, you have a BCG that acts to stimulate lymphocytes in the bladder, which then brings us to the issue. So can you go back, please? I'm not sure what's happening. Sorry. Maybe I'll just stop for a second until you guys figure this out. Can you go back to the supercharged BCG? Phil, could you control the slides from there and just do it from there? No one touches button. You can go back, please. Okay, so okay, you ready? Are you controlling the slides? You got the button? Okay, thank you. So if you look at this data, I don't know of any BCG type BCG that does this, and there's a reason for that. As I said, because it's been engineered to stimulate lymphocytes. This magic word, lymphocytes. Next slide. So we have the first dosing of this recombinant BCG in the United States, and now instead, this is all press release, we now have over 200 sites that are going to sign up, and this QR code allows you to sign up to get access to recombinant BCG for your patients. Next slide. So let's talk about this concept, which is the paradigm changing, and not, as this headline has been saying, that you really got to get away from chemotherapy. My task is to explain to the world why for 75 years we've been devastating our body. And next slide. You begin to see how the effect of chemotherapy induced lymphopenia. Actually, statistically, and in well-documented publications over the last 50 years, even 35 years, sorry, shows rapid regression and reduced overall survival across all tumor types. Next slide. So the concept of lymphocytes as a new organ at risk is a concept in 2023 that we need to all address. This is a difficult conversation because if you speak to 99% of your colleagues, the concept of ALC is not foreign, but unrecognized in a simple CBC test. If you hit less than 1,000 lymphocytes per microliter, you have what we call lymphopenia. If you go below that, 700, you have severe lymphopenia. What that means, you have no NK cells, you have no CD8 killer T cells, you have no memory T cells, you have nothing to kill the cancer cell. So why would we be involved in killing the lymphocytes? That's what chemotherapy does. Next slide. And here are the publications. You can see that publication at 2009, 1994. This is not an unknown issue, but what the field has done is taken these publications and made them as poor prognostic factors. these were predictors of patients that would not survive. And this is what I believe has been the barrier to the cure. We win the battle, lose the war. We see a low response rate, and as you see at this conference, everybody's excited about a response rate. It doesn't help you if that response rate disappears within 6 months. And the reason it disappears, because you've actually generated the method for it to disappear, so you don't have duration. And duration matters because you want patients to live a high, great quality of life and for a long time. So that's what I'm trying to work our way through based on the science. Next slide. Here's a paper that's relevant to this audience. Here in 2018, it shows that you have low lymphocytes and high neutrophils, which happen to be immunosuppressive neutrophils. There's a ratio called NLR, neutrophil lymphocyte ratio. So you have a double whammy. You have patients with immunosuppressive neutrophils, which, by the way, we induce by giving GM-CSF. Isn't that crazy? Some of our treatment, we give chemotherapy, wipe out the lymphocytes. We said, oops, we've wiped out your neutrophils, so we're going to give you a GM-CSF. And now we drive out immunosuppressive neutrophils. And we drive down the lymphocytes, which means mathematically you create a ratio of what you call a high greater than 2, because you have immunosuppressive neutrophils that suppress your T cells and NK cells. And you happen to have no NK and T cells. And unsurprisingly, next slide. This is what you see. So this is not new in NMIBC. Think about that. We'll show you this is not new in lung cancer, breast cancer, not new in pancreas cancer, not new in non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. So what this is a universal immune system of your body. That's what's difficult, because every time I get up on the stage, it's like gobbledygook science. It's not science. This is your immune system. The only thing that matters is how to protect your body from cancer is your immune system. So why would you ever want a low lymphocyte count, knowing that chemotherapy is the cause of this low lymphocyte count? Next slide. And here is in TA and T1 disease in the same paper. Look at that recurrence free. So it's great to have a CR. It's horrible to have a 40% reduction within 1 year, in which all the data that we've seen at this AUA shows. So when we say we're playing defense and duration, it doesn't make any sense. You're not playing defense, you're playing offense. The idea is that for you to have a long life with bladder cancer, I will share with you later when we recover the lymphocytes in patients BCG naive. We now have patients 10 years free of disease and survive the bladder sparing of not having a cystectomy. Next slide. Here's another paper, and you'll begin to see it's almost exhaustive. We have 250 papers in the literature and counting. Here, across all tumor types, there's melanoma, non-cell, and here's renal, bladder, gastric, endometrial, hepatobiliary. The fact that it's all tumor types means it's a universal effect in your body. Lymphopenia is dangerous. Lymphopenia results in significant decreased survival in all cancers, but in this audience, renal cancer and bladder cancer. And this is not our data. These are Kaplan-Meier plots over and over and over again. And you can basically just draw that the Kaplan-Meier plot from every paper we see. Even in checkpoint inhibitors, this is 2024. Lymphopenic, non-lymphopenic, and head and neck cancer, lung cancer, and so on. This is a paper that we pulled out, and on the right-hand side, hard to read, but that's all the cancers, all with hazard ratios around 0.3, 0.4, all of them with lymphopenic numbers that 500, 700 to 1,000. So what's exciting and remarkable, all you need now, after all the money we spend on biomarkers and genomic sequencing, is a CBC. Medicare costs $4. And all you need to do is an ALC. And so the question is, I I ask the question, so do you know what ALC is? And I get the response, curiously, just remind me again. And this is not to embarrass the doctors. The doctors have never had the opportunity ever until today to reverse ALC. So this is what's happened in prostate cancer. So some of you know if you have high-risk prostate cancer and you have biological or biochemical recurrence, and you give radiation and ADT, we will show soon and probably present at the next AUA. One dose of radiation wipes out your lymphocytes, your NK cells, and it does not recover for even a year. So here was a patient with this high-dose, very high-risk prostate cancer. In the green, we said, we're going to protect your lymphocytes, and we gave them Activa plus adeno PSA vaccine, and then had the radiation, and within days to weeks, his PSA dropped to normal, and that it is now, without ADT. This is the paradigm change of how we're going to treat prostate cancer patients. We are now moving this into clinical trials across the nation. And I think this then becomes a universal issue for even progression of patients with bladder cancer. So let me explain this missing link now and why we have what we now call the cancer bioshield. And as you say, we have this unrecognized absolute lymphocyte count. So we need to educate the world about ALC, not ANC. And that a low ALC is not just a prognostic factor, it becomes an opportunity for us to have a therapeutic effect, a factor that we can modify in advance of doing damage to the patient. And so we've now had a few little diagrams, as to say, you now end up with a crippled, painful bladder. I understand that this fierce article said this is going to be a new change in treating bladder cancer, and I see in the plenary sessions at this meeting, let's not just give gemcitabine, let's give gemcitabine and docetaxel. And when you give docetaxel, let's give steroids. The three most potent lymphocyte-killing agents that you can think about. And let's give checkpoint inhibitors. And by the way, let's wipe out these cells that are most important. So I talk about let's win the battle. CR is great because you carpet bombing everything, and you lose the war. Because there's no way when you wipe out all these cells that you get memory, and there's no way you're going to get duration. And that's what we meant, duration matters. And I know of no presentation in this meeting that shows immediate duration of complete response and ongoing now. 45 months. I know no paper in this meeting that shows patients who are naive, still free of disease, 6 out of 6 in the phase 1 study, 10 years. And I know no paper in this program showing in papillary disease, bladder-free sparing 82% at 36 months. So when we say duration matters, it really matters. To prove that in fact our drug does what it does, in 2002 we published this in Journal of Immunology. Now this is the problem. We are urologists, we are oncologists, we are virologists, but we're not immunologists. So when a paper gets published in the Journal of Immunology, it's like a tree falling in the forest and nobody knows about it. But here it is in 2002 when we give Activa, the cells proliferate, and more importantly, stay up. And these are the most important cells, the NK cells, CD4 and CD8 T cells. So this is what we call now the cancer bioshield or the immune bioshield. Just from a CBC, we can measure the ALC. I want you to focus on this slide because I know I don't want to get nerdy about it, but the only cells that express IL-15, if you look at this IL-15 receptor, are the lymphocytes. The natural killer cell on the top there, the T cell at the bottom, the monocyte, the dendritic cell, And we happen to have chosen a molecule called Immunity that is the IL-15 that specifically goes to that IL-15 receptor. It specifically is targeted to stimulate these very important, the only cells that are important for memory in your body, and have a lung effect either intravascularly or through subcutaneous injection, so that we can activate this natural killer cell that kills the tumor, that's the tumor, with these granzymes from the outside in. The importance of this natural killer cell doing this is stimulating gamma interferon and overcoming even loss to checkpoint inhibitors. That's why in our lung cancer trial, when we take patients who progress on checkpoint inhibitors, given them our Activa, while progressing on their checkpoint inhibitor, and convert them, and we actually change the lymphopenic level greater than 1,500, we're now seeing 21 months median overall survival, compared to 7 months with docetaxel. So, how do I then relate this to this audience? Well, as I said, we have unprecedented data on the duration of response in bladder sparing. At the end of the day, when we're treating our patients with non-muscle invasive bladder cancer, what is important is saving the bladder. To have a bladder removed in these patients is devastating. Patients will do anything and everything, and rightly so, to maintain the bladder. I don't think people even realize that the overall survival rate of patients having cystectomy is less than everything else that we have. You will see we have over 90% disease-specific overall survival rate, which is unprecedented data again. So let me talk about CIS, which we just gotten approved. And this got approved in April 2024. And just 1 year, we're literally weeks before the first AUA, and so this is our second AUA. We begin to see now with 5-year follow-up, I know no trial that is 5-year follow-up in cyst disease. And we begin to see this. Now, again, it's really important. I'm not doing trial comparisons whatsoever. What I'm doing here is reporting what's been reported at this AUA meeting. So the source of this information is at this AUA meeting. And the TAR 200 and CG was at the plenary sessions. And I really want people to understand not the headline, where it says the 82% versus the 76% versus 71% CR rate at any time. It's great. But really what is really important is what happens to the patients at 24 months? What happens to the patient at 36 months? What is the median duration of response? So how does it help a patient to have a very painful chemotherapy? And anecdotally, I get that. I get the basis of the principle design. It was developed initially to treat overactive bladder. But when you have gemcitabine secreting continuously, you actually generate an overactive bladder. But be that as may, the most important thing is what happens even at 12 months. You have a 40% drop of the CR. What happens at 6 months? No data. What happens at 45 months? No data. With regard to CG, they're giving GM-CSF. I don't think people realize GM-CSF actually drives the myeloid-derived suppressor cells. So what happens at 36 months? No data. But most importantly, when you look at the cystectomy-free rate, there's no data in this entire meeting of a cystectomy-free rate at 36 months of 84%. Most importantly, you look at the safety. And the safety on this patient getting the BCG, and you'll hear from the supercharged BCG, that the safety of BCG itself is tampered by Immunity. And this is just cis and papillary. And that's why I'm saying, win the battle, lose the war, lose the bladder, and duration really matters. So on that basis, we showed at our Sam Chang presented yesterday, there is no data in the entire industry, in the entire disease. So when I see press releases says best in disease with CRA, median duration CRA 25 months, I really think the science, the truth of the science really needs to speak. And here you could see the duration has yet to be, the median point of 30% has yet to be reached, and it's 45 months. There is no data that exists. So it's not just best in class, it's best in disease. And there's a reason for that. The best in disease and best in class is because we've generated lymphocytes. We've generated NK cells, T cells, and memory T cells. And if you look at the package insert, that's in the package insert, and that's what's so important to us. We ensure that it's in the package insert section 12.3 that the mechanism of action of NT is to generate lymphocytes without upregulating Treg cells. Which then brings us to papillary disease. And we published this in the New England Journal of Medicine 2022. We understand that the FDA said then it didn't make much sense to us. Compare this to docetaxel. When we understand that we know what we're going to be doing to those patients. By the way, we have a trial now in lung cancer where we're giving checkpoint plus Antiva versus docetaxel in patients who have no other treatment. Patients refuse to go on the docetaxel arm. Patients are getting smarter. They understand that chemotherapy is old school. Chemotherapy kills the lymphocytes. Why are you asking us to do that? Well, we didn't have this kind of data that we now have. So, if you look at papillary, 12-month primary endpoint, meaning you have to be disease-free as your primary endpoint in 12 months. At this AUA session, 12-month data, none. Magically, all the data stops at 9 months. If you look at the question of what happened in 24 months, obviously no data. If you look at cystectomy avoidance rate, 12 months, we have 92%. Think about that, 92% of patients with papillary disease can spare their bladder. By 36 months, 82% of patients. The disease-specific survival rate for all these patients is over 90%, both papillary and cyst. So I think it's a little unethical to say to your patient with papillary disease, just hang there, we'll figure this out, and knowing that the probability of 3 years saving their bladder is real. We will soon publish this data, but it's been presented yesterday, again by Sam Chang. I've got about 15 minutes left, so I think I now have the opportunity to have a very difficult discussion. The NCCN is composed of thought leaders, oncologists who make decisions on behalf of their patients. So when the Antiva was approved in 2024, the NCCN guidelines had approved Ferring and Merck's indication for papillary disease, despite the fact there was no data or approved. We thought, well, that's fair, let us submit ours. Denied. I reached out to the chairman and the vice chairman and said, well, we have meetings to happen and there'll be timing, no problem. I said, fine. J-code happened, the results got published in New England Journal of Medicine. It is now denied. So you ask a question is, if you have data like this, where it is the FDA approved data, the only clinical data, the AUA, in both cyst and papillary disease with 5-year follow-up and bladder sparing for 36 months, and an 82% cystectomy avoidance in papillary disease at 36 months, in which papillary disease is not approved in NCCN guidelines, but yet approved for Ferring and Merck. I will not attribute any basis of conflict or attributions of that decision, but I really urge you, you are the academic leaders in the country. I urge the NCCN to be true to their mission. The only reason for actually making guidance is to provide access to patients and doctors for the product that is available. I have yet to understand, as easy enough yesterday, the basis of how you could approve Ferring and Merck with no data on papillary, quite like this, and deny the approval in your guidelines, which then belies the issue of what do we trust. And I think the only thing we need to trust is science. The only thing we can trust is data. And my job is to stand up and present the data. And I'm not trying to do comparative trials. I'm trying to say, let's talk about the biological mechanism of action that will determine long-term memory, duration, response, and safety. My job is to protect your immune system. Now, I understand that the new HHS secretary has received a lot of heat about protecting the immune system with all the toxins that we have. I completely agree with him. We have to protect our immune system. So now we have this IL-15 superagonist. The only cells in the body that matter, that kill cancer, have an IL-15 receptor. This is the only product that activates that receptor and stimulates NK and T cells. So therefore, on that basis, it has a safety profile consistent with BCG. It has durable complete responses greater than 48 months. It has cystectomy avoidance for over 36 months in both cis and papillary. The ease of administration and time matters, by the way, in the clinic. You don't have the patient sitting around. As soon as they get the BCG, they get the NT. The logistics of receiving it is immediate, and you don't need a freezer. But I think, more importantly to me, is the other side. We really need to recognize what we do to our patients. Let me give you an example of glioblastoma. We all recognize, we haven't cured glioblastoma, we all recognize patient glioblastoma die within months. Yet, think what we do for patients with glioblastoma. We give them radiation. You will see at maybe the next AUA, just one dose of radiation knocks out your NK and T cells, and it doesn't come back for 12 months. We give them steroids. Steroids is the most potent killers of lymphocytes. And then finally we give them a thing called temodol, an alkylating agent, a chemotherapy, the most potent killer of lymphocytes. So we see a patient, we kill all the lymphocytes, and we wonder why we have no progress in brain cancer. So why would we be doing now double dose chemotherapy in patients? Why would we be putting a device into that bladder and having chemotherapy bleed out continuously, creating dysuria, creating an overactive bladder, and wiping out the lymphocytes? Why would we be giving GM-CSF that now we know the plasticity of the neutrophils and creating tumor suppressor cells? So I leave with this slide to really plead, well, let's look at the science. And what was really pleasing today, I met two doctors today that I've never met before. One was a urologist, immunologist, and said, oh my God, I now understand what you guys have been doing. And the other was a doctor that served in Iraq, a pilot. Said, you know, our pilots sit on these devices that have severe radiation, and the incidence of prostate cancer is happening to them so high. So we now, for the first time, have a immunoprotective molecule. You can protect against radiation, protect against chemo, protect against steroids. And that's why we call this the BioShield, the immune BioShield and the cancer BioShield. So with that, I have 10 minutes left here. I'm happy to take questions. And I hope that we've addressed the issue. But I want to bravely address, and I do understand at risk, this question of the why about the NCN inconsistent policy. And I would love to sit down with the chairman and vice chairman and explain how could you approve something with guidance with ignoring a 92% cystectomy-free, 52%, 82% cystectomy-free rate at 36 months. And the only product that's been submitted to the FDA for BLA with data now going up to 5 years. I leave with this uncomfortable question because I think I have to speak out on behalf of the patients. And I have to speak to whatever dark rooms people sit around and make decisions. And I hope at the end of the day, you all understand we'll win the battle, win the war, save the bladder. And that the bladder is in a quantum state, depending on what decisions you make, we make as a doctor. We can either give the bladder and create an immunocompromised state. We can either give chemotherapy and give the bladder a crippled state. We can have a wonderful early CR but no duration and have a total radical cystectomy, a lost bladder. Or you can end up with a healthy, competent bladder that a long duration of response and bladder sparing. And I hope we understand this is all based on science. So thank you for that, for your attention. I'm happy to take questions. I can't believe there can be no questions.
Controls IL-15 in the body?
Sorry, say that.
What controls IL-15 in the body? What's the normal control mechanism?
Good question. So the question, what controls IL-15? Now the exciting thing about IL-15, the NIH has been trying to work on IL-15 for 2 decades. The NIH identified all the cytokines in the body. IL-15 is the #1 cytokine that could cure cancer. There's been a mystery about the IL-15. You asked the question, I'm going to go into deep, nerdy talk. The IL-15 in your body only lasts for a few minutes. But in order for the IL-15, because it's so potent, to really activate these cells, it has to be bound to another thing called IL-15 receptor alpha. 2 molecules fused together. IL-15 receptor alpha sits only on the dendritic cells, the cells of your body, that educate your T cells so they can remember. So when you have an IL-15 receptor alpha combined with the IL-15, that's an active IL-15 on these T cells. That's been the secret. So Intiva is IL-15 receptor alpha bound to IL-15, looking for the T cells, the NK cells, and memory T cells. It gets even more confusing. In the immunology textbooks, that receptor on these T cells are called IL-2. So the industry, as you know, has developed IL-2, except that IL-2 stimulates the T regulatory cells, the immunosuppressive cells. So this is where understanding very fundamental immunology at the receptor level was so key. That's the science I'm talking about. So we developed then Intiva, in which not only the IL-15 is bound to IL-15 receptor, but we put a molecule on it so it could last for 7 to 14 days with a single injection. It's called the FC molecule and binds to the FcRn receptor that circulates around, and now you have this long-acting single injection molecule. I hope that answers your question. Thank you for that question.
These patients regularly getting their lymphocyte levels checked, and are they administered the therapy when they have a low lymphocyte count, or is that predetermined?
Good question. So the question is, are these patients getting their lymphocytes checked, or are they mentioned before? It's interesting. We've collected these CBC's differentials, and that's what we're submitting now for. We just got received a thing called the RMAT designation authorization from the FDA, which means regenerative medicine accelerated approval. Because in our studies, we looked at the AUC, and what we did then, they all got Activa, but these are third line, fourth line lung cancer patients that's been ravaged by chemotherapy and radiation. Third line, fourth line, fifth line, sixth line, seventh line metastatic pancreatic cancer patients that's been ravaged with chemotherapy. Patients with renal disease, colon disease, and we looked at all their lymphocyte at the baseline. Most of them were initially in the low range, meaning lymphopenic. The moment they got the Activa with the checkpoint, the lymphocytes was either maintained or recovered. And in some cases, we got 150% increase in the lymphocytes. And with hazard ratios of 0.3, increased the median overall survival by almost double in triple. Both lung cancer, all tumors, and that's been published soon. It's been considered by a high impact journal. And that's the basis of the RMAT that got approved, in which now for the first time in the history of cancer, we can treat lymphopenia. And that's what I think my job is, not only treat lymphopenia, but maybe prevent lymphopenia from happening. And more importantly, this doesn't just affect cancer patients, this affects patients with infections, patients with long COVID, because COVID creates lymphopenia. HPV creates lymphopenia, viral infections creates lymphopenia. And if we can clear the virus of patients with long COVID with these activation of the NK cells. So now I ask you to go back to all your patients and pull out your CBCs and look at ALC. And that's the quote here, what is your ALC? And until this meeting, and the meetings before, I would say, what's your ALC? And doctors look at me curiously and says, what is ALC? I said, look at your CBC. It's the absolute lymphocyte count. I hope that answers the question.
I understand the chemotherapy killed lymphocyte and caused leukemia. What about those IL-15 receptor? Is that also reduce that receptor numbers? I mean, if that's the case, how the super agonist of 15 to mitigate that?
So the chemotherapy has basically a carpet bombing effect. And that's what's taken me so long to bring this information out. We got deep into the IL-15 receptor, the MHC1 receptor, the TCR receptor. It turns out, let's just look at macro, big picture, do those cells even exist? If you have no NK cells, no T cells, it doesn't matter what you do to it. So it turns out that what the chemotherapy does, it just blanket kills red blood cells, platelets, lymphocytes. But the good news is this IL-15 receptor is there. It doesn't modify the receptor. And because we have this super agonist, by the way, to get even a little more nerdier about this IL-15 that we have, we've modified the IL-15 on our Activa, genetically modified, so there's 10 times more affinity for the receptor, IL-15 receptor site on the T cell, NK cell. or the beta gamma receptor. So I can't stress enough steroids, which is our standard therapy when you give chemo, radiation, which is our standard therapy when we give radiation, chemo, which is our standard therapy with chemo, all wipe out the lymphocytes. So this madness must stop, because we have now developed for 50 years the treatment, and then we develop new therapies to fix the side effects of the treatment that we just given. So when we give chemotherapy, you get neutropenic fever, and now you give GM-CSF, just so that you can give more chemotherapy, so that you can wipe out more lymphocytes. So if you take it that simplistically, how do we change this paradigm for all patients? And the basis is that we, as physicians, are wiping out our immune system and being surprised that we've not won the war against cancer. The good news is that we have an opportunity to change that paradigm with AT.
Hi, thank you for the presentation. It was very informative. Just wanted to ask a quick question about the papillary only submission. I believe FDA draft guidance for clinical trials last year included a note on papillary only trials, a desire for a randomized trial with a time to event endpoint. And I believe in November, Immunity Bio had noted potential plans to initiate a randomized papillary only trial. And then in January, you guys announced that, or recently you guys had announced that maybe filing this SBLA. So just curious if you could provide a little more insight into how you guys came to that decision rather than a papillary only trial. Thank you.
So in January, we had a meeting with the FDA leadership, including Rick Pastor and Peter Marks and whoever else was in the leadership at that point in time, to reveal this missing link in the light bulb. And the light bulb went on, we cannot deny our patients this missing link. That's why we got the RMAT authorization. We also shared with the FDA, is it ethical to ask patients, because the randomized trial you said we launched was docetaxel. I know the results of docetaxel. You know the results of docetaxel. In lung cancer, it's 5-7 months. When I give docetaxel, I'm going to give them steroids, which takes them exactly what we don't want to do. Is it ethical to ask us when we have something that actually can treat lymphopenia? Unlike any other product out there, I get that. So there's law that says you'll go and do your chemotherapy, gemcitabine, and you need to do whatever, randomize against gemcitabine and docetaxel, I don't know. So I think there's a level of enlightenment, no way to describe it. I presented this in 2012 at 60 Minutes with Sanjay Gupta. Some of you may want to go look at that, it's a long time ago. And I said, the day will come out when we will be enlightened. You know, many years ago we used leeches, we used bloodletting, and now we have chemo, and that's barbaric. Yet, if we understand that what we've been doing is destroying our immune system, combined with the toxic exposure that we were getting, and the increased numbers of patients now in young people with cancer. And I shared with many that in our clinic for the first time, we saw a 13-year-old with metastatic pancreatic cancer that passed away. We are now seeing 10-year-old, 11-year-old, 12-year-old kids with colon cancer. I'm seeing 21-year-old young ladies with ovarian cancer. I think the light bulb went on. That helps.
Hello. We know that carcinoma in situ is more aggressive than what is just papillary. And we saw in other trials in the same scenario with other drugs that the rates of complete response, are worse than disease-free survival. In this case, scientifically, it's the other way around. The results are discussed. Better complete response rate with carcinoma in situ and worse disease-free survival rates, just with papillary disease. Is there any reasons for that?
I can only speculate. The data is what the data is. As you know, the papillary is dependent on the skill of the surgeon. And that's some of the difference. And I'm a surgeon, so I'm not disparaging surgeons. But the most important thing that matters is the duration of that. So we'll have to see what the other, and it really is varies depending on the institution that you get the results from. Any more questions? Well, with that, thank you very, very much for attending. I think this is a wonderful opportunity to share.